For more than 70 years, historians believed that every secret weapon built by Nazi Germany during World War II had already been discovered, studied, and explained. The world knew about the terrifying V-2 rockets designed by Wernher von Braun, the early jet fighters like the Messerschmitt Me-262, and the desperate late-war wonder weapons that were supposed to save the collapsing Third Reich. These machines were powerful, advanced, and sometimes years ahead of Allied technology, but none of them arrived early enough to change the outcome of the war. Everything seemed documented. Every blueprint had been catalogued. Every experiment appeared accounted for. That is why what American soldiers found in April 1945 shocked them so deeply. Inside a hidden German hangar, they discovered an aircraft unlike anything they had ever seen before. It did not look like a normal plane, and it did not follow the rules of engineering that every pilot and designer understood at the time. The shape alone suggested technology decades ahead of its era. Even stranger, the files connected to the aircraft were immediately classified after the war, and the full story remained hidden for decades. The reason why this machine was kept secret for so long would later lead historians to one disturbing question. What if Nazi Germany had been closer to the future than anyone realized? To understand how such a strange aircraft could exist in the middle of the 1940s, the story begins long before the war itself, with two German brothers who refused to accept the limits of traditional airplane design. Walter Horten and Reimar Horten grew up during the 1920s, a time when Germany was forbidden to build military aircraft because of the restrictions imposed after the World War I. The Treaty of Versailles banned Germany from developing an air force, but the rules did not forbid gliders. Because of this loophole, gliding became extremely popular across the country, especially among young engineering enthusiasts. The Horten brothers spent their weekends climbing hills with homemade wooden gliders, launching themselves into the air and experimenting with ways to stay airborne longer. While most people treated gliding as a sport, the brothers treated it like a scientific puzzle. They noticed that almost every airplane in the world shared the same basic shape. There was always a long body in the middle, wings attached to the sides, and a tail with vertical fins. This design worked, but it also created a lot of drag, the invisible resistance caused by air pushing against the aircraft as it moved forward. The more drag a plane had, the more power it needed to fly fast, and more power meant heavier engines and more fuel. The brothers began to wonder if all those extra parts were really necessary. Their idea sounded simple but almost impossible. Instead of building a plane with a body, wings, and tail, they imagined an aircraft made almost entirely out of one smooth wing. No separate fuselage, no tail fins, no unnecessary pieces sticking into the air. Just a single curved wing that could carry the pilot, the engine, the fuel, and the weapons all inside its shape. This concept became known as the flying wing. At the time, most engineers believed such a design would be unstable and impossible to control, but the Horten brothers were not convinced. They built small models in their parents' garage using plywood, glue, and fabric, and when they tested them on hillsides, the results surprised everyone. Their strange wing-shaped gliders stayed in the air longer and moved more smoothly than traditional designs. The problem was that turning a backyard experiment into a real combat aircraft required money, factories, and government support, things the brothers did not have. For years their ideas remained only experiments, interesting but impractical. That changed in 1943, when the war situation forced Germany to look for desperate solutions. By that time, the tide of World War II had turned against Germany. Allied bombers were destroying cities every night, factories were burning, and the German Air Force was losing planes faster than it could replace them. The head of the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring, demanded a miracle. He announced an extreme challenge to every aircraft company in the country. The project became known as the 3x1000 requirement. The new aircraft had to carry 1,000 kilograms of bombs, fly 1,000 kilometers, and reach a speed of 1,000 kilometers per hour. At the time, this sounded almost impossible. Most bombers could barely reach half that speed, and even the newest jet engines used so much fuel that planes could not travel very far. Engineers at companies like Messerschmitt and Junkers believed the numbers simply did not make sense. But the Horten brothers saw an opportunity. Because their flying wing created far less drag, it could travel faster using less fuel. Their design was one of the few that might actually meet the insane requirements. They submitted plans for a new aircraft called the Horten Ho-229, and instead of laughing, Goring approved the project immediately and gave them top priority. The aircraft they built was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It had no tail, no long body, and almost no straight edges. The entire plane was shaped like a smooth curved wing. When American engineers later examined the captured prototype, they expected to see aluminum and steel like every other military aircraft. Instead, they found that much of the structure was made from wood. At first, this looked like a sign that Germany had run out of metal, which was partly true, but the real reason was far more interesting. The brothers understood how British radar systems worked. Radar sent out radio waves that bounced off metal surfaces and returned to the receiver, revealing the position of incoming planes. Wood, however, did not reflect those waves as strongly. The Horten brothers went even further by mixing carbon dust into the glue that held the wooden layers together. Carbon could absorb radio waves instead of reflecting them, reducing the signal even more. Without fully realizing it, they had created the world's first stealth aircraft, decades before the term even existed. Documents found near the aircraft suggested an even darker purpose. The Ho-229 was designed to carry a payload of about 1,000 kilograms, exactly matching the 3 by 1,000 requirement, but intelligence officers believed the number might also have matched the weight of experimental weapons Germany was researching late in the war. Although Germany never completed an atomic bomb like the one used by the United States in the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, scientists were experimenting with radioactive materials that could be used in so-called dirty bombs. These weapons would not destroy a city with one explosion, but they could spread radiation across a large area, making it dangerous to live there for years. A fast aircraft that was difficult to detect on radar would have been the perfect delivery system. Some blueprints even described larger flying wing bombers capable of crossing the Atlantic Ocean, raising fears that targets might have included cities far beyond Europe. As Allied bombing increased, German engineers began moving projects underground. In the Aal Mountains, in what is now Poland, the Nazis built a massive tunnel network known as Project Reese. Prisoners from concentration camps were forced to dig huge holes inside solid rock where factories could operate safely out of reach of bombs. Train tracks, ventilation systems, and power stations were installed deep underground. The plan was to continue building advanced weapons even as the war above ground was being lost. But time ran out before these plans could be completed. In February 1945, test pilot Erwin Ziller flew one of the Ho-229 prototypes, but an engine caught fire during the flight. Without a tail for stability, the aircraft went into a spin and crashed, killing the pilot. Only weeks later, American troops captured the nearly finished third prototype before it could ever fly. The aircraft was taken apart, packed into crates, and shipped to the United States, where it remained hidden for years in storage connected to the Smithsonian Institution. American engineers studied the flying wing design carefully, and some historians believe its ideas influenced later aircraft such as the Northrop B-2 Spirit, one of the most advanced stealth planes ever built. In 2009, researchers tested a replica of the Ho-229 against radar systems similar to those used in the 1940s, and the results suggested the plane would have been much harder to detect than normal aircraft of the time. In the end, the Ho-229 never flew in combat, and it never had the chance to prove whether it could have changed the war. The Third Reich collapsed before the project could be finished, leaving behind a machine that seemed to belong to the future rather than the past. Even today, historians still debate the same question. If this aircraft had been ready earlier, could it have made any difference? Or was it simply another brilliant idea that came too late to save a losing war?